My name is Elena Voss. At 34 years old, I finally understood exactly what I was worth to the people who were supposed to love me most. It happened on what should have been the happiest day of my brother's life, his wedding day, in front of 120 guests at the beautiful lakeside pavilion. Ryan lifted his champagne glass, looked straight at me sitting near the front in my wheelchair, and with a voice loud enough for the entire room to hear, said, "And let's not forget my sister Elena, who's always had a way of making everything about her. Some people just can't let go of the past, even if it means faking how bad things really are." The room went quiet. Then he smiled that same charming smile he's used his whole life and walked over to me. Before anyone could react, he grabbed the handles of my wheelchair, tilted it sharply backward, and yanked hard. I hit the polished wooden floor with a sickening thud, my body folding in ways it shouldn't have to anymore. My father stood over me instantly and said in a low, controlled voice that carried anyway, "This is exactly what we've all been dealing with for 2 years. She's the reason this family has suffered." My mother turned her face away, like the sight of me on the ground was too much for her to bear. But here's what none of them knew. For 2 years, I had been quietly gathering the one thing they could never talk their way out of. None of us could have guessed that within 12 minutes 5 officers would walk through those wide glass doors, and the whole elegant reception would go completely still. Welcome back to stories like this, where ordinary women face impossible families and answer with quiet strength instead of noise. If you believe the calm ones are the people you should never underestimate, you're in the right place. Drop a comment and let me know you're here with me. Let me take you back to the beginning so you can understand how we all ended up on that floor. I live alone now in a small, one-story cottage about 30 minutes from the big family house where I grew up. Everything inside is arranged so I can reach it from my chair. The counters are lower, the cabinets have pull-out shelves, and there's a wide path from the kitchen to the living room where I do most of my work. I drive a modified sedan with hand controls, and I make a quiet living as a paralegal doing research and document review for 2 small law firms in town. People see the wheelchair and they often soften their voices, offering help I don't always need. I stopped correcting them a long time ago. It takes energy I'd rather save for the things that actually matter. My family never offered softer voices. They offered distance, and when they did call, it was usually to remind me not to dwell on the past. I still remember the version of me they wanted everyone to believe in, the girl who was always a little too sensitive, a little too dramatic. Before the accident, I was the one who stayed late at the family logistics company, double-checking routes and contracts so my father and brother could close bigger deals. I thought that made me valuable. I thought being useful meant being wanted. The night everything changed started like any other. I had just left the office after helping finalize paperwork for the biggest distribution contract the company had ever chased. It was raining hard, the kind of cold October rain that makes the roads shine like black glass. I was driving home on the old county highway when I saw headlights coming at me fast from the opposite direction. Not my headlights, someone else's. Wide, high, and way too close. Then came the impact. I woke up 9 days later in the hospital with a fractured spine at the mid-thoracic level. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive. My family said it was just a terrible single-car accident. They said I lost control on the wet road. They said a lot of things. But I remembered those headlights. I remembered the jolt of metal hitting metal before my car left the road. I tried to tell them. I really did. My brother Ryan would sit by my bed, take my hand in that warm big brother way of his, and say gently, "You hit your head pretty hard, sis. There was no other car. The police report is clear." My father would nod from the doorway, already thinking about how this might affect the company's reputation. And my mother, she would just smooth my blanket and whisper, "Let's focus on getting you better, honey. No need to make things more complicated." After enough months of that, after enough holidays where the conversation died the moment I mentioned the truck, they stopped saying I was confused. They started saying something worse. they started saying I was faking it. I didn't argue. I learned early that arguing with people who need you to be wrong is a waste of breath. Instead, I sat in my new reality with my palms resting on the cool metal of my wheelchair arms and started listening more carefully than I ever had before. Because the loudest thing I owned now wasn't my voice. It was the paper I was quietly collecting. Let me take you back to that October night 2 years ago, because some details still live in my bones. I had stayed late at the office again. The company, Voss Logistics, was on the verge of landing a massive regional distribution contract that would have more than doubled our fleet. My father Victor had poured everything into it. Ryan was being groomed to take over dispatch and eventually the whole operation. I was the reliable one behind the scenes, the daughter who never asked for credit as long as the family succeeded. The rain was coming down in sheets as I drove home on County Route 17. My wipers were working hard, but visibility was poor. I remember slowing down, both hands steady on the wheel. Then, in my rearview mirror and then suddenly beside me, those high headlights appeared. A large pickup, moving too fast for the conditions. It clipped my left rear quarter panel hard. The sound was sickening, metal screaming against metal. My car spun, left the road, and rolled down a steep embankment. I don't remember the full impact, just the crushing pressure, the world turning upside down, and then darkness. When I woke up in the ICU, my mother was crying softly in the corner. My father was already speaking with the responding officer, an old golf buddy of his. Ryan brought flowers and told me how lucky I was. The official report called it a single vehicle accident caused by driver error on wet roads, no mention of a second vehicle. No skid marks from another car, nothing. I tried to explain what I remembered, the truck. The color, dark blue or black, the way it didn't even slow down, but every time I brought it up, the room grew tense. My father would set his jaw and say, "Elena, the company is under a lot of pressure right now. We can't afford rumors or investigations that might scare off partners." My mother would add gently, "Sometimes the mind plays tricks after trauma, sweetheart." Ryan was the most convincing. He'd crouch beside my bed, look me in the eyes with that sincere expression, and say, "I love you, sis. But you've always had an active imagination. This is hard enough without you making it worse for everyone." After a while, I stopped talking about the truck out loud, but I never stopped seeing those headlights. In the months that followed, while I was learning to transfer from bed to wheelchair, learning to dress myself again, learning that my legs would probably never work the way they used to, my family was busy rewriting history. They told relatives and friends that I had always been a nervous driver. They suggested the trauma had affected my memory, and slowly the narrative became concrete. Elena had an accident. It was unfortunate, but life moves on. I felt myself becoming smaller in their eyes, from daughter to problem, from family member to liability. That's when something shifted inside me. I stopped trying to convince them. Instead, I started preparing in silence, because deep down, I knew the truth wasn't just about proving I wasn't crazy. It was about proving that the people I loved had chosen to bury me along with the evidence. I still press my palms against the armrests of my chair sometimes when the memories get loud. The cold metal grounds me. It reminds me that I survived that night, and I would survive what came after. The months after I left the hospital were some of the loneliest I've ever known. I moved into my little cottage, learned to navigate a world built for people who can walk, and tried to rebuild a life with legs that no longer obeyed me. Meanwhile, my family was busy protecting their version of events. They called it moving forward, I called it erasure. Every Sunday dinner I was expected to attend, the rule was the same: don't bring up the accident. My mother would say, "We've all been through enough, Elena, let's not drag the past back up." As if my spine was something we had all buried together. As if my wheelchair was an inconvenience I had chosen just to make holidays awkward. I heard the whispers, my father telling my uncle in the kitchen, not quite quietly enough, "She's milking it for sympathy. Some people thrive on attention." Ryan would laugh it off and say, "Come on, sis, you were never the best driver anyway. This was bound to happen eventually. They turned my injury into a character flaw, a burden, a mistake that threatened the family business. Voss Logistics was my father's pride and joy. He built it from 2 trucks and a lot of debt. The big contract they were chasing wasn't just money, it was legacy, Ryan's future. The thing that proved Victor Voss had made it. And I, with my questions about a mysterious truck, was suddenly a liability that could scare away partners or invite investigations. So they did what powerful families often do. They closed ranks. They stopped asking how I was really doing. They stopped offering rides or help with modifications around the house. Instead, they offered silence and pressure. Ryan even suggested once that maybe I should sign some papers releasing the company from any liability, just to keep things clean. When I refused, the disappointment in the room was heavy. I learned to smile through it. I learned that my calm unsettled them more than anger ever could. While they were busy pretending I was fine or exaggerating how difficult I was doing something else. I was watching, listening, and starting to collect proof. The first real crack came through something as ordinary as an insurance letter. They refused to cover a newer, more comfortable wheelchair model I needed. But in that denial, there was a paragraph about my right to appeal and request my full claims file, including all medical records, police reports, and incident documentation. For 2 years they had told me the past was closed. Here was a faceless insurance company reminding me that the records of my own body still belonged to me. As a paralegal, I knew exactly how to ask. I filed formal requests the next morning: hospital records, ambulance reports, the full police file, not just the 1-page summary my father's friend had helped write. I didn't tell my family. There was no point. As far as they were concerned, I had already been filed away as the difficult daughter. But paper, I was learning, doesn't forget, and it doesn't care whose reputation is on the line. That decision, to start pulling threads quietly, was the moment I stopped being just a victim in their story. I became the person writing the next chapter. Even if they didn't know it yet. The first envelope arrived 3 weeks later. I was sitting at my kitchen table, the same one where I eat alone most nights. When I opened it, inside was the full crash report. Not the tidy 1-page version my father had shown everyone, but the complete file with attachments and notes. I read it slowly, the way I read every important document for my clients, with a pen in hand and my heart steady. The longer I read, the colder I felt. There was no mention of ruling out a second vehicle. In a serious injury crash like mine, you'd expect the officer to address it clearly. Skid patterns, debris field, point of impact. But this report simply skipped it, as if the possibility had never existed. Even more telling, the EMS run sheet, the paramedics' own observations from the scene, was missing. 2 different documents, 2 different sets of eyes. Yet only one had made it into the official story. I sat there at midnight with my palms flat on the table and felt something shift inside my chest. Not quite hope yet, but direction, patience with purpose. Getting the actual EMS run sheet wasn't easy. There were privacy rules, proper forms, and offices that moved slowly. But my job had taught me precision and persistence. I filed correctly. I followed up politely but firmly every week. While I waited, I started asking careful questions around town. Quiet conversations, coffee with the right people. That's how I found Mr. Harlan Whitaker, an older gentleman who had stopped at the scene that night. He invited me to his modest home, made me weak coffee, and told me what he saw without me having to push. He had been driving home when he crested the hill and spotted my car in the ditch. A dark pickup was pulling away quickly. He noted part of the plate and gave it to the officer on scene. No one ever followed up with him. I left his house that day with tears in my eyes I didn't let fall until I was back in my car. A stranger had seen exactly what I remembered. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel crazy. I pressed my hands against the armrests and whispered to myself, it was real. My father found out about my requests sooner than I hoped. Small towns talk. He showed up at my cottage. One of the few times he ever did, and didn't even sit down. "What do you think you're doing, Elena?" he asked, voice low and controlled. Appealing an insurance denial, I said calmly. That's all. He looked at me the way he looks at a shipment that doesn't balance. Let it go. For the family. But I was starting to understand what for the family really meant. It meant protecting the company, protecting Ryan's future, protecting their image. It didn't mean protecting me. That was the moment I stopped asking them to believe me. I was building something that wouldn't need their belief. The EMS run sheet finally arrived on a quiet Thursday afternoon in a plain envelope that felt heavier than it should. I made myself a cup of tea first, needing one normal moment before everything changed again. Then I sat down, opened it, and read the paramedic's own words from the night of my accident. It was clinical, short, devastating. Paint transfer on driver's side door and quarter panel, color inconsistent with victim's vehicle. Intrusion pattern suggests side impact from another vehicle. Recommend full investigation of possible second vehicle. There it was, in black and white, written the same night I was pulled from the wreckage. Someone had hit me and left, and my family had spent 2 years telling me I imagined it. I didn't cry, I didn't call anyone, I simply sat very still and said out loud to my empty kitchen, I'm not crazy, there was a truck. Then I made copies, locked the original away, and kept moving. I hired Daniel Reeves, a calm, experienced attorney who specialized in personal injury and didn't look at me with pity. He reviewed everything I had gathered and said the words I had been waiting to hear. This is enough to move forward. While his team worked on formal preservation letters and pushing for deeper investigation, I continued my own quiet research. I found the body shop where a dark pickup had been repaired and repainted just days after my accident. Cash job, no insurance claim. The owner's name on the invoice, Ryan Voss, paid for by my father. The pieces were fitting together, but I still needed more. I met with Detective Ramirez, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had seen her share of small-town cover-ups. I laid out everything, the run sheet, the witness statement, the body shop records, the missing documentation in the original file. She listened without interrupting, then leaned back and said, This shouldn't have been buried. I'll reopen it quietly. She asked me to do the hardest thing I'd done yet, nothing. Don't confront. Don't tip them off. Let the investigation build. So I did. I smiled at family gatherings. I let them believe their pressure had worked. Underneath it all, my silence had become my strongest weapon. The wedding invitation came on thick, cream paper in my mother's elegant handwriting. For one brief second, the little girl in me who still wanted to belong felt a tug. Then I remembered who I had become. I wrote back yes in my own careful hand. I had a navy blue dress altered for the day. I had my chair cleaned and polished, and I made sure my attorney and Detective Ramirez knew exactly where I would be on that Saturday. Because after 2 years of being told to stay quiet, I was finally ready for the truth to speak. My father came first. He showed up unannounced one evening, standing in my doorway like the cottage itself offended him. No stairs, too accessible, too independent. You've been talking to people, he said. It wasn't a question. I didn't deny it. I have a right to my own records, Dad. He stepped inside but refused to sit. His voice stayed low, the way it does when he's trying to control a room. Do you have any idea what an investigation would do to the company right now? We're this close to the biggest contract in our history. Your brother's future, jobs for dozens of people, let it go, Elena, for the family. There it was again, that phrase, but now I heard what it really meant. Protect the business, protect Ryan, protect everything except me. A few days later, my mother came alone. She sat on my couch with her purse in her lap, twisting the strap. She started sentences and stopped them. I could see her standing at the edge of the truth, wanting to step forward but pulling back out of fear. Mom, I said gently, if you know something you can tell me, or not. But I'm going to find out either way. Her eyes filled with tears. For one moment I thought she might speak. Then she whispered the same old line. Your father knows best how to protect this family. She left without saying what she clearly knew. Ryan came last. He didn't bring the warm big brother act this time. He sat across from me at my kitchen table and looked at me with fear, wearing the mask of anger. "It was an accident," he said, voice cracking. "You think I meant for this to happen. You've always been a distracted driver anyway. Don't ruin my entire life over this." He actually said those words, my legs, my future, my pain, reduced to an inconvenience in the story of his success. I asked him to leave. At the door, he turned back. "Don't ruin the wedding, Elena, you'll regret it." I didn't regret it, but he would. Through all these visits, I stayed calm. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I simply continued gathering what I needed while letting them believe I was still the same broken sister they could manage. My silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was strategy. The invitation arrived on a warm afternoon in early summer. Thick cream cardstock, gold lettering, my mother's perfect cursive, addressing me as if nothing had ever been broken between us. "Mr. and Mrs. Victor Voss request the pleasure of your company at the marriage of their son Ryan to Brooke Callahan." For just a moment, the younger version of me, the girl who still wanted to be part of the family photos, felt a small ache. Maybe this was their way of trying, maybe things could heal. Then I remembered the way Ryan had looked at me when he tipped my future onto the floor of possibility. I remembered my father's cold calculations, my mother's turned face. This wasn't an olive branch, it was a stage. They wanted me there, smiling, visible, playing the role of the reconciled sister so the whole town, and more importantly, Brooke's wealthy family, could see the Vosses as united and flawless. Perfect for business. Perfect for the future they had planned. I almost said no. Then I thought about timing. My attorney had told me the civil complaint was nearly ready. Detective Ramirez said the reopened investigation was reaching a critical point. Everything I had built in silence for 2 years was about to surface, whether I was at the wedding or sitting alone in my kitchen. And if I'm being honest, there was something else. A quieter, fiercer part of me that had been invisible at the edge of every family table for 2 years wanted to be in the room when the truth finally arrived. Not to cause a scene, I didn't need to throw anything. I just wanted to be present when it landed. So I wrote back one simple word in my own careful handwriting: yes. I bought a beautiful navy dress that fit perfectly around my chair. I had my hair done and my wheelchair detailed until it shone. I made sure the small folder I would carry with me was organized and ready. On the morning of the wedding, I sat in my quiet cottage for a long time, with my palms resting on the cool metal armrests, the one constant comfort I'd had for 2 years. Then I drove the 30 minutes to the lakeside pavilion under golden sunlight, completely calm, carrying nothing in my hands, and everything in the truth I had carefully collected. I was ready. The lakeside pavilion was beautiful in that effortless way expensive venues are. Soft string lights hung across the rafters, the lake shimmered silver and black beyond the tall windows, and a small ensemble played gentle music in the corner. 120 guests moved through the space in good dresses and pressed suits, champagne glasses catching the light. I found a spot near the windows where I wouldn't block any paths, something you learn quickly when you use a wheelchair. I accepted a glass of sparkling water and simply observed. My family was performing happiness perfectly. Ryan worked the room like a man who had already won at life, his arm around Brooke, laughing a little too loudly. My father held court near the bar, shaking hands with important guests, the future in-laws especially. My mother floated between tables, adjusting centerpieces that didn't need adjusting, her smile bright and practiced. For a while, I was furniture again. The sister in the chair by the window. Most people offered polite smiles and quick hellos, then moved on. I let them, because I knew the night was still young. Inside, my heart was steady. My hands rested calmly in my lap. I had spent 2 years learning how to carry heavy things without showing the weight. At one point, my mother approached, twisting her rings the way she does when she's anxious. "You look lovely, Elena," she said softly. "Thank you for coming. Let's just have one nice night for your brother." I looked up at her and smiled gently. "I'm not here to cause trouble, Mom, I promise." She searched my face for a moment, longer than usual, as if some part of her sensed that my calm wasn't the same as surrender. Then she nodded and moved away. Ryan passed by once, his expression tightening when he saw me. "Glad you could make it," he said, but his eyes said something else entirely. "Behave." I simply nodded. As the evening moved toward toasts, I felt the air in the room change. The lights seemed a little brighter, the music a little softer. Everyone was waiting for the perfect moments. I took one slow breath and kept my hands still. The fuse I had quietly built over 2 years was burning down, and I was exactly where I needed to be when it finally reached its end. Ryan tapped his glass with a fork, that bright ringing sound cutting through the room. Everyone turned toward the head table with expectant smiles. He thanked the guests, praised Brooke until her cheeks flushed, and then, because he could never quite leave me alone, he raised his glass in my direction. "And to my sister Elena, who's had it tougher than most. We're all so glad you're here with us tonight." A few polite claps followed. I smiled and nodded. It might have ended there if an older woman seated near me, Brooke's sweet aunt, hadn't leaned over with genuine kindness and asked, "Honey, if you don't mind me asking, was it an accident that put you in the chair?" The question was innocent. I answered the way I always do now, truthfully, without drama. "Yes," I said calmly. "Someone hit me and drove away, I remember it clearly." The words landed like a match on dry grass. Ryan's face changed instantly. The alcohol and the pressure of the night pushed him over the edge. "Oh, here we go again," he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Not tonight, Elena. Stop making everything about you." I hadn't spoken to him, I said so. That was when my brother, on his own wedding day, in front of 120 people, lost control. "She's faking how bad it is," he announced to the room. "She always has, blaming this family for her own mistakes for 2 years now." The music stopped, glasses were set down, 120 faces turned toward us. My father moved fast. He crossed the room and stood over my chair, his back to most of the guests. In a voice loud enough to carry, he said, "Sit there and be quiet. You have always been the biggest disappointment to this family. You will not ruin your brother's night." The words hit harder than the fall ever could. Then Ryan stepped forward, flushed with anger and champagne. Before anyone could stop him, he grabbed the arms of my wheelchair and yanked violently. The chair tipped. I hit the floor hard on my hip and shoulder. A collective gasp went through the room. Someone screamed. Glass shattered. I lay there for a moment, taking stock of my body the way I had learned to do. Nothing new was broken. A kind young server I didn't know rushed over and helped me back into my chair with quiet decency my own blood had never shown. "Thank you," I told him evenly. "I've got it from here." I sat upright again, hands folded in my lap, perfectly calm. That calm did something powerful to the room. They had expected hysterics. They got composure instead. Guests started looking at me not with pity but with dawning questions. My father stared at me. For the first time in 2 years I saw real doubt in his eyes. "What did you do?" he whispered. Outside, the sound of tires on gravel grew louder. The truth was coming through the doors. 5 officers entered through the double doors. The warm party lights caught on their badges and radios. The entire room seemed to pull back against the walls. The lead officer scanned the scene quickly, taking in the overturned chair that was no longer overturned, the broken glass, and me sitting calmly in the center of it all. My father stepped forward immediately, using the authoritative voice that had worked in this town for decades. "Officers, this is a family misunderstanding. There's no need." "Someone called about an assault," the lead officer said, his eyes moving to me. "Mom, are you hurt?" This was the moment I had prepared for 2 years. I reached into the small bag on the side of my chair and took out a business card. My hands were completely steady. "My name is Elena Voss," I said, loud enough for the silent room to hear clearly. "That man is my brother, Ryan Voss. He just pulled me out of my wheelchair in front of all of you. There are over 100 witnesses. This is the card of my attorney, Daniel Reeves." I turned the card over. On the back, you'll find the case number for an active investigation being handled by Detective Ramirez. 2 years ago, my brother hit my car with his truck and left the scene. My family paid cash to have the damage repaired and hidden. For one heartbeat, the room was so quiet you could hear the lake lapping outside. Then it exploded. Ryan started shouting, "She's lying. She's been obsessed with this for years." My father's voice rose too, red-faced and booming. "This is a private family matter." But I stayed silent. I didn't need to say anything else. The lead officer had already radioed in the case number. When dispatch confirmed there was indeed an active file with Ryan's name in it, his whole demeanor changed. "Mr. Voss," he said to Ryan, "I need you to step outside with me." That was when Mr. Harlan Whitaker, an older guest from Brooke's side of the family, stepped forward. The same man who had stopped at the scene 2 years ago. "I'll say it to anyone who needs to hear it," he announced clearly. "I was there that night. I saw a dark pickup pulling away from her car. I gave the plate number to an officer. No one ever called me back." The official story died in real time across 120 faces. My father went pale. My mother sat down hard in the nearest chair. Ryan looked at me across the ruined reception, with the expression of a man who finally understood the bill had come due. I rolled my chair forward just a little and spoke directly to him, my voice quiet but carrying. "You all kept telling me to let it go for the family," I said, "so I did. I let go of the family." An officer gently placed a hand on Ryan's arm. The night that was supposed to celebrate his perfect future became the night it ended. They didn't drag Ryan out in handcuffs like a movie. It was quieter and more devastating than that. He was detained that night for the assault in front of over 100 witnesses. The older charges, leaving the scene of an accident causing serious injury, would take longer, but the investigation was now impossible to bury. In the following weeks, the case moved forward with the kind of momentum that comes when evidence is overwhelming. The paint analysis from my salvaged car matched Ryan's truck perfectly. The dashcam footage from another witness who had finally come forward sealed it. Internal company emails discussing how to handle the Elena situation were recovered. My father and the owner of the body shop both faced charges for their roles in the cover-up. Voss Logistics lost the major contract. Trucks were sold off one by one. The empire my father had built his identity on crumbled. Ryan eventually took a plea deal. The sentence felt both too long and too short compared to 2 years in a wheelchair, but it was real. He went away. My mother came to me one last time when most of the dust had settled. She knelt beside my chair, the way she should have done years earlier, and whispered through tears, "I knew. God forgive me, Elena. I knew what happened and I stayed silent." I looked at the woman who had chosen fear over her daughter and felt the last heavy thing inside me settle into something I could finally put down. I didn't forgive her that day. I'm not sure I ever fully will, but I touched her shoulder once because she was still my mother, and even endings deserve a small measure of mercy. The civil suit my attorney filed settled for an amount that ensures I will never need anything from the Voss family again. I bought a better wheelchair. I modified my cottage further. I started volunteering with a local organization that helps people newly adjusting to life with disabilities. The company my father traded his daughter's truth for no longer exists in the same form. He lives quietly now. We don't speak. Ryan's marriage to Brooke ended before it really began. She took off the ring the same night. And I finally understood the difference between being useful and being wanted. I stopped waiting for my family to choose me. I chose myself instead. I still live in the same small one-story cottage with the wide paths and lowered counters. I still work from my kitchen table doing legal research. But everything feels different now. I have real friends, people who see me, not my chair. I have lunch with Mr. Harlan Whitaker every few weeks. He still calls me young lady and tells me stories from his long life. I bought the better wheelchair I once had to fight for. Most importantly, I sleep through the night again. Carrying that secret alone for 2 years taught me something profound. Some weights are not meant to be carried in silence. Write it down. Keep the records. Trust your own memory more than their comfort. The people who hurt you will rarely hand you the truth. You have to claim it for yourself. Justice didn't feel like fireworks or dramatic victory. It felt like a heavy door finally closing on a room I had been trapped in for too long, with me on the right side of it. If you're watching this and someone in your life has told you to stop remembering something you know happened, hear me. Write it down. Keep the paperwork. Don't argue with people who need you to be wrong. You don't have to win the argument. You only have to stop letting them write your story. Type the word truth in the comments if this story touched something deep in you. If you've ever been made to feel like a burden by the people who were supposed to protect you, know that you are not alone. The quiet ones have strength too. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay calm while you build your case. I came into that wedding on these wheels. I left on them too, but I left free. That's my story. 2 years of being called a liar. One wedding day that finally told the truth for me. I spent a long time waiting for my family to admit what they had done. The day I stopped waiting and started gathering proof was the day I got my life back. Thank you for sitting with me through this. If it reminded you to trust yourself, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.